Hello and welcome to another episode of Undercooled. Today we have an awesome guest. We have Dr. Tershia Pinder-Grover, who is the director of the Center for Research on Learning and Teaching in the Engineering School, which is having its 20th anniversary in like a week or two.
Yes.
So we're very excited about that. So welcome, Tershia. And maybe we can start by hearing you tell us a little bit about you, what your journey in science was and teaching, so we know who you are.
All right. Thanks, Steve. First of all, thank you both for having me here. This has been, I'm really excited about being here with you all today. I would say that my journey through engineering education has been an interesting one, right? I started off as in undergraduate, I studied fire protection engineering at University of Maryland. I don't know if you know that about me or not. But then I came to Michigan for graduate school in mechanical engineering and received both my doctorate and PhDs here and just kind of stayed. And what really kind of switched my professional path was I had the chance to work at the Teaching and Learning Center, where I'm now the director. And as a graduate student, I actually worked with fellow graduate students to help them think about their teaching. I observed classes, gathered student feedback. I learned about educational research through that interaction, and it just kind of opened up my mind to the possibilities that there's a whole body of literature that we could be leveraging and using around teaching and learning, and that just got me hooked. And I haven't looked back since.
That's excellent. So you mentioned already that you're the director for CRLT-Engin. Can you just talk a little bit more overall about what CRLT is, how it came into existence here at the University of Michigan, and what that looks like?
Yeah, sure. So the Center for Research on Learning and Teaching is basically a teaching excellence center that supports all 19 schools and colleges here at the University of Michigan. It's actually the oldest teaching center in the nation, so that's something kind of unique to Michigan. And our center really around, I would say, the late 90s, early 2000s, began working with the College of Engineering. We've had partnerships throughout that time period, but the College of Engineering was really interested in having a stronger presence, disciplinary specific support around teaching and learning, and with the work of our director, the executive director of CRLT, Connie Cook at the time, and Jim Bean, who was the associate dean for academic affairs, they worked together to create our satellite office, which is CRLT in engineering. And as Steve said, we are celebrating 20 years in 2024, and so we're really excited about that.
That's excellent.
That's great. So I know when I got to the university a long time ago, they just threw me in a classroom and I, figured, what do I do now?
Yeah.
And I think that's an experience that's shared by most faculty members in places. And I asked my department chair, well, how am I supposed to teach? And I was just told, well, you learned, just do it. They do it to you. And of course, that's not very satisfying. And so, I learned about CRLT a long time ago before CRLT-Engin got started. And I got to work with Connie Cook and then Matt Kaplan, and I learned so much about teaching. I should also give a shout out also to Susan Montgomery.
Absolutely.
Because when I was a brand new faculty member, she was a teaching faculty in chemical engineering, and she gave talks, and that was the first time I ever heard the words active learning.
Yeah.
And I got to say, that kind of changed my whole life.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
And so, CRLT has just been fantastic to helping me, and I know that now almost every top university has a teaching center like this. So I guess we're hoping in this podcast we can eventually get to how teaching centers like CRLT can help materials educators really up it to the next level with what they're doing with teaching of their students. But one thing I find kind of unusual is why have a whole center just in engineering? So maybe you can explain that and talk about what challenges engineering students face that really weren't being served by a general one-size-fits-all approach.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I would say that when you consider best practices around teaching and learning, there are some fundamental things that make sense across any discipline. You mentioned active learning as an example. Like that's just good basic teaching, right? But how it might look in a literature course will look very different in a thermodynamics course, right? And really thinking about how do you tailor some of those key principles to that specific environment. And so I think that is the real crux of what CRLT and engineering has been trying to do throughout our entire time, is really take that, the best practices in the literature, begin to translate it from the educational jargon that may exist, that may not fully resonate with some of our engineering colleagues, and then really think about, now how can we apply this in the lab? How do we do this if you are in a 300-person lecture? And really try to make those adjustments and do that translational work. And so for me, I think that in a lot of ways, there are very disciplinary, specific things that are in our culture that it's helpful to have a good understanding about. And I think a lot of our consultants have that as a background. And I think that was part of what back in the late 90s, early 2000s, that really the College of Engineering wanted. They really wanted to have someone who has the background, who's gone through the classes, who can look at the math and not be intimidated by it, right? And be able to work through the challenges that may be presented to different faculty members.
Yeah. As you're describing this translation process of taking things that exist and adapting them to engineering specific contexts, I had to reminisce a little bit of me having come here to be teaching in engineering, having never been an engineer, having never taken an engineering course. I almost discovered it the opposite way. I had the PhD in education. I didn't know what engineering was. And so to discover that backward was a very cool process to say, what is an engineer? What is an engineering student? What does an engineering student need to learn? Oh, how do I translate what I know about pedagogy to this particular context?
Yeah.
So I completely understand what you're saying about there are things that are just different here that require adaptation and flexibility for that matter.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So as we're talking about more of this teaching-oriented part and working with students and what are the needs of the students, I'd like to ask you about what CRLT broadly, but especially CRLT-Engin does in terms of directly supporting faculty with their instructional work, as Steve was hinting, but also what do you do with students, especially like graduate students, to help them grow into becoming more adept instructors?
Yeah, so I would say that a lot of teaching and learning centers have many of the same kinds of support services. And so one thing that we all do are consultations around teaching. And so that could be anything from a faculty member coming in and having, I'm having this challenge in my class, my students aren't really participating, or I'm noticing that they're really struggling with certain kinds of assessments, and I don't quite understand, is there something with my grading? Is it something with how I'm setting up homework? Like, we can talk through those particular challenges that are specific to that instructor. Consultations might even include anything from looking at those wonderful end of term evaluations and having someone to actually interpret those for you, right? Because, we focus in on the two comments that maybe could have been rephrased a little bit, right? We kind of focus in on the negatives, but it's helpful to have that consultant to work with you to say, okay, let's look at the big picture and see what are the things that we can change, what are the things that we want to do more of. And one of the services that our center offers is something called a midterm student feedback session. And for me, I feel like that's a service that is revolutionary when it comes to teaching. So it's something whereby We meet with the faculty member ahead of time. We talk with them about their goals. We ask them about what are the things that you want us to look for as we're in your class and we're observing things. And then we go to the class and we observe. We're trying to match up. The professor said that this was their particular goal. How does that look like from the student perspective, right? Because we're not necessarily going to be an expert in that particular course, right? So I'm a mechanical engineer, but I've observed classes in industrial and operations engineering and nuclear engineering. I don't necessarily have all the technical background, but I know a lot about engineering. And so I can kind of still have that fresh eye perspective. And so I'm able to observe the class, and then I will invite the faculty member to step out of the room, and then we have a confidential conversation with the students where we ask them, like, what are the strengths of the class? What are the specific things that are really helping you to learn? And we really kind of focus it on the learning piece. We're not, we're not really looking for just random compliments, but really what's helping them to learn the content more effectively. And then we also ask a second question that really empowers the students to offer suggestions for how things could change or shift, right? And so we gather all that data from the students, and then we process it, we create a report, and then we meet with the faculty member, and then that's when the real fun begins, where we begin strategizing, right? Because, there are some things that are easy fixes. Oh, I can totally do that. I can put my videos on the website or whatever the case may be, or I can provide this or that. But then there's some things where it doesn't actually align with your teaching philosophy. And so we work with faculty members to help them figure out, how do I tell my students, I hear you, but I actually think what's pedagogically better for you is this. Right? And so we help them figure out, how do you gather that feedback, but also kind of make sure that students know that they're heard, but also can appreciate why you may not be able to give them exactly what they are suggesting.
Sometimes what we want and what we need are not the same thing.
They're not the same. They're not necessarily the same. So we really try to work with faculty in that regard. And so a lot of our consultation services, the midterm student feedback, the classroom observation, those are like bread and butter kinds of services that we offer. But like many teaching centers, we have different kinds of teaching workshops that we provide. We have a seminar series that we do every semester, about 5 or more workshops we offer every semester. We do the orientation. For both new faculty, new graduate student instructors, and new undergraduate instructional aides. And so we are supporting all levels of new instructors to just help them feel acclimated. So they're not just thrown into the classroom as you were describing there, Steve, but rather it is that they're prepared, that they learn about the science of learning. They understand how students learn. They have an appreciation for what is inclusive and equitable teaching practices, right? And so we try to kind of pull all those pieces together in our orientation so that our students can will experience teaching in a different way. So hopefully that, I think that answers some of your questions. I don't know. Did I get to?
That was a lot of answers to a lot of questions.
Okay.
That was great. And I can certainly speak from my own experience. I think I've had at least like 20 MSFs over my career. In fact, I had, Gren came in yesterday, and my class is one of those where I have very clear ideas of the pedagogical approach I want to take,
right.
And it often doesn't align at all with what students expect.
Right.
So it's difficult, and so I'm leaning into that, knowing this in advance. Gren has done you've done MSFs for my class. So we're doing a 2-step MSF. Gren came in yesterday. This is early in the term.
Right.
And really the purpose that she's serving is to help me explain the pedagogies and why this is valuable, and to ask the students to reflect on the kinds of questions that she was posing to them, knowing she's going to come back in about 8 weeks to hear what they have to say. So we're, in a way, recruiting the students to help us improve the course in a very deliberate way and explaining why it's happening. And it's something I couldn't do myself. It has to be a very knowledgeable third party, knowing it's confidential.
Right.
And so I'm hoping that we've never tried this before, so this will be an interesting experience.
I think what it speaks to is the fact that you really are engaging your students as partners, right? So you are trying out a different approach pedagogically, right? And so you're not coming in with an assumption that everything that I'm going to do is going to work perfectly, right? And so this is an opportunity for them to give you feedback along the way. And hopefully what that'll do is just model for them that process of appreciating that formative feedback, right? Like you don't have to wait till the end of a thing in order to determine whether or not it's good, right? And so hopefully, as a part of this modeling that you're doing, that you're able to kind of shed some light for them on how to be a student too.
Yeah, my challenge this term is actually the result of one of the CRLT workshops I went to last January. Robert Talbert came. And I had known about Robert Talbert, and we talked about it before he came, but wow, what an amazing workshop that was. And so I've now read his book, and I've implemented
That's grading for growth.
his approach. And so I have a grading table. I am not mixing my units, right? Forever, we've all reduced our assessment scores to 0 to 100, and it's hard baked in our learning management systems like Canvas.
Right.
They just give you the opportunity to provide a weighted average. But he's a mathematician, and he taught us just because they're numbers doesn't mean you should average them. You should think about the embedded units and the fact that a quiz is very different than a reading assignment, which is very different than a paper or a reflection or a project. They're different. But the impact on the students is they've never seen this before. And it's frightening to them because they think they're all going to get hurt. And I've tried to come up with a way that won't hurt them, but will still preserve the value of an A. And so that's where Gren is being really helpful. But back to the workshops. I learned so much from Robert in that workshop. And you run lots of workshops. I know you run other kinds of things too, but can you talk about where the idea for having workshops and the kinds of workshops CRLT provides to all faculty across engineering?
Yeah, so I think that there are some topics that are important just to know, right? And so I think as a part of our seminar series, we have some reoccurring topics that we like to offer. So we'll have a session on active learning, because I think, you can never have enough active learning. And because basically every time you try a thing, all your students are different, right? And so you have to really think about that implementation of that active learning, right? And so we have sessions on classroom assessments, so that faculty or any instructor can really develop that understanding of how do I check for student understanding? How do I do that in such a way that I'm just not only doing a midterm and a final, right? We gotta go beyond that, I think, in order to really make sure that we're capturing and what students learn and helping them to demonstrate their knowledge. And so there's a few that are just good to have. In engineering, we also have workshops around teams. Because much of our work, our lab work, our design work is in teams, and just trying to figure out what are the best practices for forming teams, assigning good projects, evaluating teams, all that stuff is foundational. But I think the thing that our center has been shifting more towards are the learning communities, because a lot of research has shown that a single workshop is not necessarily going to lead to full transformation, right? So you went to a workshop, you were inspired, and you were able to change so much of your practice. But sometimes you might attend a workshop and you take the copious notes, and it's great. And then life happens and you haven't changed your pedagogy. You haven't had a chance to, not because you don't want to, you may not have the bandwidth, the time. And so we've been doing a couple of different faculty learning communities, which I actually think are they're basically a series of conversations and sessions that really help instructors to carve out that time to do that thought work, to think about applications for their teaching context. And I think that can be really, really powerful. And so the learning community that you attended where Robert was at was one, I think that was either alternative assessment community of practice.
Right.
And so you were able to kind of have that experience, partially because it was something that happened over time. And so we do community of practices, which are sort of sessions where there's not a whole lot of preparation for faculty. You show up, you talk, you learn from different people, you get inspired. And then we also have teaching circles, which are more in depth. They have a lot of structure to them. There's pre-work. Faculty have to create a deliverable at the end, like they might revise a syllabus or develop a new classroom activity or something like that. And then we pay them. So we give a little stipend on top of that. So that's two different ways that we kind of take the basic workshop and extend it to really try to help faculty be more reflective, but also lead to more transformative change.
And boy, I've been in many of those. The inclusive teaching, the equitable teaching, and I've gotten lots of ideas to the point where I'm now using my instructional aides. I call them not IAs for instructional aid. I call them inclusion ambassadors.
Ooh, I like that.
Because their job is to observe the team members and identify those that aren't talking. And then I tell the whole class that the inclusion ambassador is going to pull you aside privately and said, hey, you haven't been talking. Here's what we're going to do. The next time I see you're not talking, I'm going to ask you what you think. And don't be scared of that, because I'm there to help you if you get stuck. And magically, they start to talk, because we know that if people talk, the other people on the team will see that they have value to add, and then respect for each other can develop. But without the speaking, it doesn't happen. So it's, I again credit CRLT for so much. And, even when I have this great idea with a workshop, I still have a community, and it's CRLT.
Yeah.
So right after that happened, I called Gren up and said, Gren, I want to redesign my course using all this cool stuff. Can we meet? Can we talk about it?
Yeah.
And I met with her 2 times across 3 months before I started doing it. And now she's doing my MSF.
Right.
So I really feel like CRLT-Engin is my community.
Because we're connected, and I think that's what's really powerful, right? It's like you start developing relationships with your faculty partners, and the faculty develop relationships with our staff, and we're able to kind of talk about this is what I tried last time. I want to try this other thing, and work together to kind of figure it out. Yeah, absolutely.
That community building aspect is exactly what I was just about to bring up. I've also done I've done a teaching circle. I've done several of the community of practice activities and series around a whole bunch of topics, everything from the how to teach in a flexible classroom to, the list goes on. And I've certainly learned and improved as a teacher from those. But being honest, I think the biggest benefit to me was meeting all my colleagues around the college and actually spending time interacting with them about a topic of mutual interest, which is how do we teach better? And now even one of my co-instructors for a course that I co-teach with technical communication, we met in a CRLT community of practice years ago, and we finally get to work together, and it's so good. It was meant to happen.
Absolutely.
So there we go. In addition to all of the excellent faculty development work that happens, I know CRLT also works a lot with graduate students. So what are some of the opportunities available to these people who are just getting started in their teaching careers?
Yeah, so I can speak to what we offer at CRLT in Engineering, but I actually want to start first with what our CRLT more broadly does. And we have a whole Preparing Future Faculty seminar that really supports graduate students as they're thinking about academic careers. And so maybe some graduate students have had an opportunity to be a graduate student instructor and teach, right? But others may not, right? And so we have, it's like a 10-session seminar in May. It's actually open to the whole university. So there's some STEM students there, but there's also humanities and social science. And I think what's really great about that is that you're developing that community that we were talking about, of folks who are interested in teaching and really want to reflect on, how do I create a syllabus? What is my teaching philosophy in the first place? And this is a place and space where they can actually develop those tools. And the Preparing Future Faculty movement, if you will, has been around for over 20 years. So many institutions have Preparing Future Faculty type programs, workshops, and that's something that other institutions can take advantage of. And that's something that our CRLT on Central Campus offers as well.
That's interesting. It's kind of, I've been here a long time. So has Tim. We've sat through so many faculty interview talks. And it's so interesting when they get to we all tell them you have to talk about your teaching plan.
Yeah.
And you can tell when they've been at an institution that prepared them and when not. Because those that are prepared talk all about, here are the things I'm going to do with active learning. Here's how I'm going to drive inclusion in my classroom. Here's how I'm going to do different kinds of assessment. And here are the things I'm going to experiment with.
Right.
And then you get the person who didn't have that and they say, I like to inspire my students by giving them great examples on the board. And you're going like, oh my God, this person has no clue what's going on with teaching. And I think, it's kind of an early warning sign where you see the culture is definitely changing. So today, new faculty come in with much more teaching experience than I ever had. Nobody did that when I was a graduate student. They just said, oh, you're a good teacher. You should be a teacher. And it was bad.
Right. Yeah, I think what's interesting is that I think over time, as these Preparing Future Faculty seminars, workshops are being unveiled, that's really beginning to help shift the culture so that people have had a chance to kind of think about it ahead of time. I know with a lot of our orientations, many of our new faculty, they're familiar with with some of the concepts, and so we're able to go a little bit deeper.
Right.
But the thing is that it's not universally true. Not everybody has that same kind of exposure, and so thinking about how can you really help them get up to speed, right? And so that's why for our new faculty, we have a special learning community with just the new faculty to kind of support them throughout. And I think, like I mentioned when I was introducing myself earlier, at Michigan, we have teaching consultants who are graduate students, and they support both graduate students and undergraduates as it relates to their teaching. And so, if they have a teaching question, they can have that same support as well.
So I think that's very interesting in the context of what we're trying to do with our podcast.
Yeah.
This is to help to, share best practices with other materials educators.
Yeah.
Most materials educators are at institutions with teaching centers, just like CRLT. They should encourage all of their colleagues in the department to get involved with it.
Yes. Come to the teaching center.
To get the graduate students involved in it so that those that decide to go into academia really get that extra preparation beyond just how to do research, but also how to teach and how to mentor. And there's many other aspects of graduate education that I know CRLT addresses. So you mentioned that you do a lot of work with undergraduates, with the instructional aides, but I got to say, I don't send my instructional aides there because I'm a little different. Again, I view them as inclusion ambassadors, and that's not the traditional kind of thing you're teaching. But what could be done for someone like me who has these other needs?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So, just to offer a little bit of context, so we're training all undergraduate instructional aides in the college. And so, some departments have very specific approaches to how they want their undergraduate students to, what they want them to be able to do. And so, it may just be, I want you to facilitate review sessions. That is your job. And then others want their undergraduate instructional aides to run a discussion or a lab to kind of have that full, the full teaching experience, Some have lots of support, this is a large course, and so all the IAs will be given, this is your lesson plan for the day, and that's the plan, the script that you're going to follow. Maybe there's a little bit of freedom to make some deviations and whatnot, but not necessarily, right? It just kind of depends on what that department needs, what that course needs, what that faculty member needs, right? And so I think when we've originally designed our orientation, it was really thinking about, okay, holistically, what do people need to know, right? But what we have done is some departments have invited us to come in to do follow-up workshops with different groups of students. And it could be the GSIs or the IAs. It just kind of depends on what their needs are. And so we'll do a departmental session that is specifically for that particular unit. So it really kind of depends. And we try to just be in conversation with departments to help think through if the main orientation isn't providing everything, maybe there's something that we can create or co-create together.
That's great.
So we've got faculty, we've got graduate students, we've got undergraduate students. It's like the whole population is being reached, or at least we're trying our absolute best.
Absolutely,
yes.
Yeah.
So what are the impacts that you see in terms of, sure, people reach, we can be quantitative. My bar chart is this high, but also just human stories of, there was this person that I helped and it was so wonderful. So what do impacts look like, and how do you track that sort of question about what you're accomplishing?
Yeah, so the impact question is really interesting because we can measure impact by how many people attended a workshop, and that gives you a metric, right?
It's a metric,
it's a metric. Is it a good one? We'll think about that later. But and so we do the bean counting, if you will. We have our annual report that we provide, and we have all those things about how many people. We typically also ask satisfaction questions to get a sense of did this particular workshop or learning community meet your needs? Was it valuable to you? Was it worth your time? That kind of thing. But we also want to know about practice and how is your practice changing as a result of what you heard from this workshop or what you've experienced. So we'll have a suite of questions which will have faculty or undergraduate or basically our program participants to be able to share, what have they changed as a result of it. And in certain cases, we've done some work where we have leveraged different instruments that are available through the literature to kind of see pre-post assessments to get a sense the tools that they say that they're using ahead of time versus after, how does that shift? So as an example, earlier in my career, I did a lot of work with graduate student instructors, and I was tweaking things in orientation, and I really wanted to get a sense of the best practices that we know that really help students learn. What do they say that they might use prior to the orientation, and then I have them do the post survey. And so I was able to kind of see the gains in different kinds of techniques that they say they would use, right? And so there's a limitation there. It's not necessarily us going in and actually doing the observation and kind of making sure. That's the next level. And I could I could definitely see us doing that in the future if we had more resources to be able to do that. It's all about resources, y'all.
All right, Santa Ono, you heard it here.
Not resources. For me, that's there's a lot of work that shows how you can kind of trace things over time, but it's really hard to be able to say it was that one workshop because there's so many different factors that go into the process of teaching.
Yep.
So one thing that's also been very valuable to me over all these years is the provost seminar on teaching, which CRLT is involved in. I realize this is the whole CRLT.
Yeah.
But one of our very first podcasts was, what did we learn at the provost seminar on teaching?
Good.
And
Wow,
it
that was
this
a while
year.
ago.
Yeah. But it was last October, November. And it was all about artificial intelligence. So you probably
Yes.
know where I'm going here. So you're at the tip of the spear for how to deal with artificial intelligence in the classroom.
Yeah.
Have you planned any workshops or teaching circles on that? Or have you noticed problems or opportunities or success stories? I got to say, I made Maisie's for both my course. I'm on my third Maisie now. And I found out last fall that they were proudly saying that 8 courses in engineering have used Maisie's. And I'm like, that's not good. I'm 2 of them. I hope it's growing, but I'm sort of floundering myself, not sure how to go with it. Do you have a Maisie in your course?
I don't, because it's the first time teaching it. And so I'm talking directly with the students constantly. It's the eternal ongoing MSF, right?
Right.
Every day. Okay, what worked, what didn't?
Yeah.
And of course, as you're saying, having a third party is so helpful for that. But next year, once I've got that human calibration out of the way,
Right.
I definitely want to see how students can benefit from an AI tutor. I think that could be a really useful component to the course. If only I had people to talk with who are trying these things and I could say, what did you do? What happened?
That's great. That's
Because
great.
we don't get that in the sort of high level introductory workshops that are offered through, IT services or things like that.
So that's a great question. So we had a community of practice last fall where we were looking at generative AI, and I think it was a good conversation, and I think we were able to highlight what the tools were, but it was just so early in the process that we were all sort of like, what's happening? What's going on? You know what I
Right.
mean? Like still trying to
Yeah.
figure it out, right? And so I think that's something that we can definitely look into moving forward. What we did this year is we actually added a Maisie to our new faculty orientation. Because we have a Canvas course as part of our new faculty orientation. And so we have a whole module on generative AI, and to just kind of help faculty think about how might I use this tool? So we gave them, we had a chance to partner with Kane, which is our IT services here in the College of Engineering, to kind of develop this module. And it gave our new faculty a chance to, like, we had prompts like, ask it these kinds of questions, just so they could just play around with all of the different tools, whether it was the UMGPT or Maisie as part of that process. And so we're actually assessing that module to get a sense of what faculty thought was helpful, what would they want to change, because like you, this is new for us too, right? And so we're trying to figure out, like, what is the best way, and partnering with faculty as part of new faculty orientation was one of our sort of ways to kind of get a sense of what is working and what is it like to have this Maisie? Because we had to change how we even wrote some of our content in our new faculty orientation because of the responses that Maisie was giving. You know what I mean? Like, it was sort of like, okay, so we need to make sure that we have the full date. Like, you just can't say September 26th. Like, we needed to say September 26th, 2024. Because if you ask the question, well, when is the orientation? And you ask it in January, it's going to tell you September 26th or whatever the date is. But the user is going to think it's going to be that current year as opposed to the other. You know what I mean? So there's like these little nuances that we were like, oh, okay. There's just like the little things. And so I think as we're learning
Right.
and, we're conducting our own research to kind of understand sort of, and I would say probably it's more evaluation than research, but, trying to get a good understanding, we're looking forward to continue our partnerships with faculty to kind of hear how are things going and what have you tried and how are you integrating assignments, and so that might encourage students to use Maisie to see if you can understand this particular phenomenon. Now interpret that, interrogate that answer. What works? What's missing? You know what I mean? And so just really kind of developing that digital literacy with generative AI tools. So
I should back up a little bit because our audience might not know what Maisies are.
that's a good, yes,
And,
absolutely, yes.
So very briefly, a Maisie is a small language model that uses what's in a Canvas course and nothing else. It's a curated data set, and it's a model that is only available for the students in that class.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
And so it's much more accurate than using just ChatGTP, which will return whatever the most of is on the web.
Right.
And it's very easy to use, and right now it's free. Were you aware that you can change the system prompt? So my first complaint with it is, come on, this is like Chegg on steroids. The students shouldn't just ask it and get the answer because there's no learning, but you can actually write it. Don't return the answer. You can tell the model, don't return the answer, but rather guide them, show them resources, make suggestions of how they can learn. And it's remarkable how well that works.
Yeah. I think what we tried to do, we played around with that system prompt so many times. And but the thing is, we wanted faculty to be able to, you have to think back, what are your goals? And what is the purpose for that particular tool? And so what we might have for goals for new faculty who are trying to learn a new tool would probably look different than having what you might want for a student who, who's kind of going through and just trying to develop their skills in particular ways. So, depending upon what your goals are, you will design your prompts and all kinds of things differently.
But I think I'd love to go to a CRLT-led teaching circle or something like that focused on Maisie.
Okay.
Because I think that's a really unique tool here at the University of Michigan that could explode internationally. Right now there's all these companies who use Gen AI to summarize what a lecture is. Okay, that's nice, but it's not really groundbreaking. A better use is something that Perry Sampson, who has a company, Learning Clues, started to do. And I started asking Maisie if it could do it, and it works. Students can ask the Maisie to provide a practice quiz or a practice exam. And I think it's a really valuable thing because students always want that.
Yeah.
But they have to take it with a grain of salt because it may not give the right answers and it may not give the kind of questions that'll actually be on the quiz or the exam.
Right.
So how do you deal with that?
Honestly, I feel like there's a really powerful place for transparency. In terms of your communication with students, making sure that you're clear about this is what this tool is useful for and what it's not, right? Because we haven't talked about sort of any of the ethical issues associated with generative AI and trying to make sure that students are knowing how in your class you want the tool used versus a different class, right? And so I think all of those ideas are really great opportunities. And I think what's exciting is that this is uncharted territory and we get to explore together.
I think one thing's clear. It's our responsibility as educators to help our students understand how to use these tools appropriately, ethically, and purposefully so they can actually improve the lives of everyone in the world because it's a very powerful, really good thing. But like anything else, boy, can it be bad.
Absolutely.
But that's our role should be. And so I feel we should learn the technology ourselves, understand it. So Tim and I did, I don't know if you know that on the ChatGPT app, the OpenAI one, you can turn on voice. And so you can talk to it, and it talks back to you. So we did a whole podcast where we interviewed ChatGPT about teaching. And we asked it questions.
I'm going to have to go look at that.
We asked it questions like, do you think that exams are a really good way to a good pedagogical technique for teaching students? And it started waxing beautifully about how awesome exams are. And then we said, excuse me, but we thought that summative assessments weren't really as valuable as formative assessments, and you didn't say anything about that. And it's very polite. It'll say, oh, you make an excellent point. You're correct. There's a large body of literature out there. So it just chose what there's the most of out there and presents it as fact, when, of course, that was true 100 years ago. But we've all learned, and I've learned from CRLT, formative assessment is a much better way to teach, and that, summative exams are pretty valueless, and all the research shows it really is. So it's interesting that that's all out there.
Well, I have to be the clock minder here. We've started talking about the future, though. What's coming next? I'm absolutely seeing that learning more about how we can teach effectively using AI tools and how we can teach our students to effectively use AI tools is going to be a very important theme for the next few years. But I want to close with an impossible question.
Okay.
So we're 20 years old now. Congratulations. Mm-hmm. What's in the next 20 years? What's the big, large scale, long-term future for CRLT-Engin, and where do you hope to, what do you hope to be able to brag about on the 40th anniversary?
That's a great question. I love how you framed it, and I'm going to answer it in my own way, and hopefully I'll get there. But I think one of the things that I believe that can really transform teaching and learning is really thinking about not just how we teach, but also what we teach. And I've been able to be a part of a really great partnership with the Center for Socially Engaged Engineering and Design, and also with some colleagues from the School of Ed to be a part of a NSF-funded Teaching Equity, Engineering Equity Center. And one of the things that we do as part of that center is really look at a framework for instruction and curricular change. And the idea is that really look at how can we really think about engineering within the context of it being a socio-technical discipline, and really kind of think about, well, what are the how do I teach in this way, especially if I've never even had classes like that as an educator, right? Like, how do I really bring in and broaden the view and perspective of engineering? And so we've been able to, as part of that grant, really do some work to to support faculty in integrating socio-technical case studies into their classes. And then the CRLT-Engin portion of it is really helping faculty really think through, I've got this content, how do I integrate it into my class, and how do I make my class environment be such a way that everyone who's in that class feels as though they belong and they can see themselves doing this kind of engineering work. And so for me, it's been really exciting to be a part of this this project, to really think about that socio-technical aspects of engineering. And I'm really excited to see where that goes in the future. And really, we've been also doing a lot of work with departments around curricular transformations and helping them look at their data, thinking about what their goals for student learning, how that actually maps onto their program outcomes, and really helping faculty and departments really think through their entire curriculum. And so for me, that's not quite the next 20 years, but I think it's within the immediate horizon in terms of really shifting how we are able to partner with departments to really think about the kind of instruction, the kind of curricular decisions that you all are creating as you're creating creating your programs and courses and so forth. And so for me, I feel like it's an untapped, not completely untapped. We've worked with 5 different departments at this point. We did 3 last year and 2 this year. And so, we're beginning that process of really working within that departmental unit, because, you can have that excellent faculty members who are doing really great things, but then they might be siloed, right? And so that experience of that student as they're going through the various classes, they may have one experience that like redefines how they think about engineering, but then other classes might be more that may be more traditional, that may be strongly lecture based, that may not extend their thinking in ways that a lot of the literature would suggest more active engagement, open-ended kind of authentic problems would be able to do for them. So I'm hopeful we can continue partnering with departments in that way, and of course working with faculty through that process.
Well, that's fantastic. Thank you
Absolutely.
so much, Tershia, for being our guest.
Thank you for having me.
And I think with that, we'll say goodbye.
That's right.
See you later.
See you next time.